Guys, Jerry Miller, it's Friday in Charlottesville. It's great to be with you. The weekend around the corner, and this is a holiday, Merry Christmas type of weekend for everybody in Central Virginia. Pleasure to be with you. I'm excited, and I woke up excited this morning because I think we have a tremendous guest coming up on the program. Councilor Cathy Galvin has been kind enough to spend the next hour with us just to talk Charlottesville and everything phenomenal about this wonderful town we live in. Let's thank some fine folks for being a part of this show before we get to Councilor Galvin. I'd like to thank Greenberry's Coffee. For 27 years, Sean and Roxanne Simmons have taken a business from the McIntyre Office Park when it was just a husband and wife team using a Honda Civic to deliver coffee to restaurants. Today, they are a global brand with locations in Qatar, Japan, Saudi Arabia, soon to open in Portland and in Washington, D.C. It's a success story I love to celebrate on I Love CVille. I'd also like to celebrate Dr. Scott Wagner of Scott Wagner Chiropractic and Sports Medicine. This doctor, now the owner of the former Quinn Farmer Auction House, 4 doctors on his team at Scott Wagner Chiropractic and Sports Medicine. We salute you, Dr. Wagner, and we thank you for the support. On that note, guys, I'd like to welcome a fantastic person to the show. Let's go to the two-shot with Cathy Galvin. First, I'd like to thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you. Your enthusiasm is infectious.
Well, thank you. And I think a lot could be said for you as well. I think in just the brief time we talked off air, I can tell you love Charlottesville.
Yes, I do.
She rode her bicycle to our studio here, and anyone that's willing to get out of the vehicle and ride a bicycle and forego the car and the traffic is fine by me, Cathy.
Well, thank you. And truth be told, I usually make better time than when I'm in a car. So.
And I can see that, especially
because of the traffic.
Especially around lunchtime on the downtown.
Yeah, you got that right.
All right, so we have an hour. So the beautiful thing about an hour with no commercials is that we can start open-ended, and then we can dig deeper into some other subjects. So why don't we start open-ended? Who is Cathy Galvin? Tell us about you, the counselor, you, the person, you, the architect.
Well, that's a long kind of life. I guess I want to start first by talking about myself as a mother and a wife of a wonderful husband. I got 2 wonderful sons, Patrick and Kevin. They're now in their 20s. And I am an architect. I'm very, very pleased and proud to be part of that very storied profession. And it is a love of mine that I brought me to Charlottesville. I was actually born and raised in Massachusetts. Brockton, Massachusetts is my hometown. If anybody is a boxing fan, they know about Marvin Hagler and Rocky Marciano. It's a pretty tough working class place. I did go to school at Boston University in Boston. I studied economics and geography. I was always into cities. I love cities. I have to thank my mom for that because she would often take me into Boston to see the Gardner Museum, to see the Fine Arts Museum, to walk Copley Square. So I love cities. And long story short, then, I was really into housing policy and affordable housing policy. One thing led to another. I was working for the Boston Housing Authority, doing feasibility studies for them. I said, I better get on the front line, so I managed assisted housing in Boston. It was in that capacity that I learned how to understand building systems like HVAC, electrical, but I also learned how to do architectural drawing. They said, you got some talent. Why don't you go to the Boston Architectural Center? I went there at night, changed my career. They said, you got some talent. Why don't you go full-time? I looked around. University of Virginia had the kind of program I wanted because it was a blend of urbanism and architecture. And so in the mid-'80s, I came to Charlottesville. So in a nutshell, that's what brought me here. And I thought I was always going to go back to Massachusetts, but I apprenticed here. You have to apprentice 3 years before you can get registration in the state of Virginia. And in that process, in that time frame, I met my husband. And then the story is already told. I stayed here. This was the city we both loved. And
did it hook you?
It did.
Yeah.
I mean, what is so gorgeous about it is that within, you've got a beautiful city that's got great urban form. Okay, I'm an architect. Please excuse that. But the built environment is beautiful. It's walkable. I was riding my bicycle ages ago. And then within 15 minutes, you're in this glorious countryside.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you visit Europe.
It's awesome.
So it is awesome. And then I'm always been a hiker, so we're into the mountains whenever we can get there. Saunders Trail is a great, near, pleasant little hike to go to. The recreational resources here are just abundant, and the cultural stuff is always, makes me realize I'm in a city, even though she's small. She's only 48,000 people.
Right, Kathy, you're bringing fire already. You're on fire right now. Judah, let's rack that right there as a sizzle reel about Cathy Galvin and who she is. We'll turn that into a highlight clip. A lot of people on the feed right now. Charlottesville and how she hooked you. I feel the same. I've been here since 2000. I came here for UVA. And Kathy, I knew a couple years in, I'm like, this is going to be my home. I mean, I was a huge sports fan, huge college sports fan. We have that with UVA. I love to eat. I love the music. I mean, I love to be outside hiking. I mean, I love the cosmopolitan feel of the downtown mall. But then when we need to, we can turn it all off by hiking Humpback Rock or Crabtree Falls.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's got everything. It's got everything. And when it hooked you, how did you respond as a big city gal going to a 50,000 person town? And I asked that because my wife she's from Long Island. And when I met her on an airplane, she was working in finance for Blackstone on Wall Street, in New York City. So when she goes from New York City in the Big Apple to here, she had some culture shock. Did you have similar culture shock?
Well, because I came here in the mid-'80s, so I had a very thick Boston accent.
Yeah.
And
can we hear it now? Can you put it on?
Boston. Architecture. I mean, that's how I said architecture. And whenever I was standing up in front of a jury to defend my work and I would say the word architecture, the whole room would crack up. I remember getting off at the Greyhound bus station, my very first day in Charlottesville. And the cab driver, could tell he was a very long-standing resident, very thick, to my ear was a southern accent. And he was rattling stuff off. I didn't understand a word he said. I'm sure he didn't understand a word I said. Then the next thing is I went to go get some iced coffee on the mall. Because in the mid-'80s, iced coffee, what's that?
Right.
I would get a cup of hot coffee and a cup of ice cubes.
Where would you get the coffee from in the mid-'80s? Curiosity here.
Actually, it was like there was a Howard Johnson's at Afton Mountain. I remember getting it once. And then there was at one point a Dunkin' Donuts on the mall. That came and went pretty quickly. And I thought, for sure, Dunkin' Donuts is a New England establishment. They would know iced coffee.
Massachusetts brand.
Yeah, but no, they didn't know iced coffee. But now, hey, we are cosmopolitan, right? Iced coffee, easy to get. But it was just an interesting thing that these little cultural differences. So I was like, well, I'm here to go to school. And then it was when I did have a good friend that took me to Humpback Rocks. I got plugged into the folk music scene, strong traditional folk music scene here. And the Prism Coffee House was across the street from the architecture school. So when I was going nuts in studio, I would just find out who was playing there and walk across the street and just kind of...
You saw some talent.
I saw a lot of talent here. And then... actually, I did belong to an Irish band called the Jig Is Up.
Get out of town.
I'm not kidding
What did you play?
Vocal.
Okay.
And I do guitar, but I wouldn't rely on
Could we get a rendition from you on the show?
Maybe later on.
Okay.
I got to get my courage and my Irish
up. All right.
But I think, but it's an amazing little place, and that was what I was kind of grieving. I was going to miss the music scene that I had in Boston. Boston, incredible folk scene. Boston, incredible classical Baroque scene. It's all here. And it takes a while to find these things, but once you do, people are warm and friendly, and very warm and friendly, and they will, show you where the great places are.
My New York wife was so taken aback by the warm and friendly demeanor at first. She was
didn't
like,
trust it.
What are you up to? What do you want from me?
See, that's the difference between Boston and New York City.
Gotcha. She always thought that was like an in to get something.
Yeah. Boston's got kind of that walkable, easygoing charm that I think because it's not as big as
in
the
New York
Big
City,
Apple.
you just put your earbuds in, you keep your head down, and you don't
there's
look
a threshold,
at
I
anything.
think. Yeah.
Because when you look at something, it's inviting something to come to you.
Yes. And when you plug in though as a parent, as a family member, and when your children start going to public schools, which we have 2 boys that went to public schools. Initially, they were at Johnson Elementary School, and then it was Burnley Moran, and then they went into Walker, Buford, and the high school. But it's an interesting sidebar because it does start segging into why I'm in elected office today. And so, mind you, by the time I started having my children, I was a registered architect. I worked for firms. I was beginning my own practice, and children become of school age. Our neighborhood school was Burnley Moran, and it was at a time, people don't remember that there was a time of school choice, and you could go to any school you wanted in the city. And we were struck by how experimental Burnley Moran was at the time. And mind you, I'm a working class kid from Brockton, Massachusetts, taught by an order of Lithuanian nuns who lived through the Bolshevik Revolution. There was a real emphasis on knowing your basics and being disciplined and focused. So I was a little bit surprised that, there were some classrooms where learning how to read was an option. And I was then looking around. We were looking around for schools, checked out some of the schools, was amazed at the price tags of private schools, and plus I wanted to be public.
Right.
And we found Johnson Elementary School, a South Side school. It was majority African American, majority free and reduced lunch, and I will say that was the best experience of our family's lives.
Really?
Excellent teaching in a very diverse community, embraced us, and it was also where I discovered the big racial divide, the class divide in our city, where neighborhoods are segregated by class and race, and the poverty level among the African American families was so high. In my child's kindergarten class of 20, 5 children were homeless, and all of them were African American. So that that was an eye-opener for me.
Motivation.
It was a motivation for me. I became the PTO president. I later then get inducted to run for school board, and then I later get inducted to run for the city council, all because I think the challenge of our legacy of segregation and racism, which plays out geographically and plays out economically, the 2 things I focused on as a youngster back in the...
This is like right in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, I just said, well, I realized it's not going to be solved in the schools. You got to solve it in the city hall, and that's what brought me there.
So many places I want to get off and directions I want to go. You're killing it. I also educated by the Sisters of Mercy from Philadelphia.
Wonderful.
And this was in a school in Williamsburg, and discipline was drilled into us either the easy way or the physical way by the Sisters of Mercy. So I know where you're coming
That's
from.
ironic, though.
Yeah, I know. It's so ironic. We thought the same thing. Yeah. The meanest people we thought in life were nuns, which is so crazy. They would hit us with rulers.
With mercy.
Right. Sisters of Mercy. Right. So where I'm going with this is, I know where you're coming from. You're motivated to get involved from a civic standpoint. How quick is it? How easy is it? How much persuading do you have to do of family members when you go from PTO to school board to city councilor? I mean, those are 3 very different levels of commitment. Once you got a taste of it at the PTO level, were you like, do I really want to keep going? Was your husband saying this? Were your son saying this?
Well, the jump from PTO to school board, the Roman Catholic background has lots of positive and negative to it. I was part of a group that worked hard to get an elected school board because I felt they needed to be more accountable. At the time, there was an appointed school board, and unfortunately, people weren't running, and so I felt guilty. I said, oh my goodness, I was partly responsible, one of the hundreds of people responsible for getting the whole 9 yards of changing the city charter, so I know how hard that is. And so I ran. And then a lot of other people were running eventually too. But when no one was, I had to step to the plate. And I did it thinking that was all I was going to do. But I found that I loved policy. This kind of abstract thing about policy, it leads to action that changes lives. And I was blessed with having a wonderfully collegial school board and a very strong superintendent who ran the school division very firmly and passionately, but informed in an informed way. So I got a really good taste of good government, and then that played into my my studies as a young undergraduate at Boston University. That, wow, I'm living what I was learning, and so that transition to the city council at that time. My husband Michael Costanzo just supported me, and I love him for that, and I've supported him in all of his endeavors. But it was more like, you've got the call to serve. You got to do it.
I feel the call to serve a lot, and I talk about it with my wife, and she's so apprehensive about it because as an entrepreneur and businessman, I'm working 80 hours a week, and my son is 9 months old, and I'm hurrying.
Ooh, okay.
I'm hurrying home to bathe him, trying to bathe him, put him to bed, and then come back. But I don't want to make this about me. I want to keep this about you.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
we're lucky to have you here.
Well, thank you, and I'm grateful to hear you want to serve, but a 9-month-old needs you.
Right.
And
exactly.
So just a little qualifier. My children were in middle and high school when I was on school board. School board was not the same time commitment as council.
Right. And where I was going with this, from my standpoint, I can already see the need, or I can see how potentially the call to serve can impact a relationship.
Yes.
Can you put it? May I ask that question? How does being on city council impact family life?
Well, I think, and I'm being honest. Obviously things were working.
Because one Monday a month, you're going to like 2 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah, and so I was reelected as a councilor back in 2015, and I ran on city council because I had gotten a lot of things moving in terms of good job training programs, good environmental initiatives, getting our infrastructure up to par, making it multimodal, and so you start things, and the wheels of government rightfully turn slow,
and you felt compelled to finish them.
So you want to finish them, but
Right.
There were challenges, absolutely, but there was a belief that we're still going to continue to make progress. Some wise person said, you can't call yourself progressive unless you're making progress. And so I ran, I got reelected, and then the first couple of years of that second term, we were doing well, and then I think the city got hit with an awful lot of turmoil and introspection with regards to the Confederate statues, and then we all know what happened August 12, 2017. We were assaulted by Nazis and white supremacists that completely shattered our belief in ourselves for quite a while.
It challenged our identity as a community.
Yes, and made us really think hard and long about, okay,
who are we?
How can we call ourselves a happy place when we do know that this kind of evil exists in the world? And it still plays out to this day with the poverty in Charlottesville. But it's been the last couple of years that with the climate in the city council chambers being so harsh and the demands so high, I have to say that because the federal government has abdicated its responsibilities for affordable housing, for giving us good immigration policy, and making sure that we have good transportation systems, and you wind up seeing that who's going to pick up the slack? It's local government. So that's actually been the challenge worth grabbing. Yes, somebody's got to, power abhors a vacuum. Local government needs to fill that vacuum that the feds have left us, because the need is still there and it's growing. So even though the challenges have been hard and painful, and my husband feels these things, all of our spouses feel these things when we're up on the dais and people are yelling and screaming at us.
Nasty stuff.
But at the end of the day, you keep moving.
You are so, like, I love the vibe I'm feeling from you, your positive energy. I can tell you're a winner. I can tell you're an overachiever. I can tell you're someone who, when you put your mind to something, probably you're going to not sleep until whatever you put your mind to gets done. I mean, as a human, I would feel like it would be so easy to, like, get discouraged with the climate where we're at, with people coming to council meetings and screaming, and I've been there, and saying nasty things to you that you don't deserve. And you're not compensated for the hours that you're putting in. You're not compensated fairly. I will say it. I think your pay should be risen, especially if it's going to turn into a full-time job. And I think it is now a full-time job post 812. Where I'm going with this is, like, how do you maintain this, like, how do you maintain this so positive? How do you stay? Is it always like this?
No. I do lots of primal screams in the basement. But thank you.
I totally mean it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have good friends. I have a wonderful family. Shout out to Michael, Patrick, and Kevin. I have a wonderful dog, Orion, who dogs give you oxytocin and serotonin, right?
Yeah.
The good feeling hormones. I think, and it's bicycling everywhere. It gets the endorphins moving in my system so that whatever toxic kind of vibe I absorb, I can work it out. But at the end of the day, we are human, have to step back. And I think we need, we're realizing more and more as a council that we need to be working more as a unit, because no one person can get this done. You got to be a team. Team is what gets the most done. I played sports in high school.
So you're a team player. Yeah. Playing team sports is so huge for life.
It teaches you a lot. It teaches you an awful lot.
I totally agree with what you just said there. Earlier this week, and I don't even know how to characterize it. Is it like a mediation meeting with the councilors? It's like, almost like it's like air the grievances. Let's characterize it that way.
Yeah.
Try to get the dialogue going. Show is yours. Put it in perspective what happened earlier this week when all the councilors are getting together in what seems to be like a therapeutic or, mediation type setting.
Well, for most people who aren't in elected office, if they're in a private company and the leaders of the company feel that there needs to be some team building, they would
take a retreat.
They would take a retreat, and a
Same
retreat
thing.
means literally get out of town, get out of sight, and do your work. We're elected officials, and we have sunshine laws. So that means that no more than two, if there are more than two councilors meeting at one time, the press must be there. So can you imagine, and the two facilitators led on to us that they were surprised that the press could stay in the room.
So if there's two councilors doing city business at one time, the press should be there, or
it's
supposed
like,
to be there?
Oh, more than two.
More than two.
So
okay.
Two councilors can have a confidential meeting.
Okay.
And you can go into what they call closed session when you're talking about personnel matters and when you're talking about contracts, when the city's buying or selling anything, because you don't want to hurt the negotiations. That is an exemption in what they call the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA. Anything else, though, it's aired, it's out there, and the questions they were asking us was, you can't be honest, you can't be a functional family, you can't be a functional team if you're all going to be talking in terms of how we all are going to get together and do games that teach team building when there are underlying challenges in relationships that need to be worked out.
What are some of those underlying challenges? I mean, there's some that the public sees, and I may ask you about them, but we don't know what happens behind closed doors. From the public standpoint, it seems there is a fair amount of distrust, and there's a fair amount of, I'm choosing my words carefully, and it's rare that I do that. A fair amount of like walking on eggshells and distrust, and you're not sure what the other person's doing behind your back. There we go.
Well, I like to look at group dynamics from many facets, and
So you're an anthropologist too?
It's called the School of Hard Knocks.
Okay, there you go. Okay.
I am a boomer. I'm 62. My parents grew up during the Depression. They both served in World War II. My dad was a paratrooper in the Pacific, and he was part of the liberating force that freed my uncle, who was a survivor of the Bataan Death March. And you read anything about that, you know the horrors of a Japanese internment camp in World War II. And his sister was an Army nurse in London, stationed during the Battle of the Bulge. My father claims that he fell in love with her just listening to my uncle talk about them. They both were from Brockton. That's how they met, in this internment camp. I say that because I grew up with a generation of parents that were had a call to serve, duty-bound, came up from abject poverty, and you rely on your own grit, but you've got family and community behind your back. So that's kind of like, I inherited that. So I'm a generation that's I'm older. I'm basically old enough to be the mother of every counselor on the dais when you look at their ages.
Not Michael.
Well, maybe not, but...
Yeah.
But so they're different generations, millennials and I guess Gen Xers.
Yeah.
We come from different formative experiences. My formative experiences was the John F. K. assassination, the Robert F. Kennedy assassination, and Martin Luther King's assassination, and the Vietnam War and Watergate. So I'm looking at what's going on around today, and I says, well, it's happened before. Well, you got to work hard. You'll get through it. And I think what my diligence and my commitment to preparedness and quite frankly excellence, which was the thing that drove us, the nuns, and drove us in working class schools,
right?
Is not understood, and what can come across as diligence to some can come across as doggedness and stubbornness. So I own that. It's fundamentally important that we build relationship and talk more. And I think that's what we realize. We need to be talking more as human beings. So
you feel your diligence and preparedness is misinterpreted as stubbornness by your fellow counselors?
And I think sometimes it can be misinterpreted as like, oh, she thinks she knows it all.
Yeah, you I think, have a personal brand on council of being very strong-willed.
And strong-willed is not, I don't think of that as being arrogant.
No, you're committed to your ideals.
Right, and it sometimes can get confused with that. The only time strong-willed
is necessarily bad is when you're not, malleable, or you're not willing to consider other opinions. But I don't get that.
Oh, thank you.
But is that what others think on council?
I think it based on what we were talking about and learning about each other, is that I think our personality differences are at first blush used or thought of as something to challenge, when I think, and I believe after our retreat, which unfortunately doesn't get reported, we began to understand, wow, each one of us has a strength, multiple strengths that complement each other. What Mayor Walker does, what Vice Mayor Hill does, what Councilor Signer does, what Councilor Bellamy does, what Councilor Galvin does. That's the talent and the skill sets we all bring to that table is actually quite phenomenal.
Yeah.
So it was almost like an aha moment. Let's capitalize on that. Let's work on that. And if there's a question of not trusting, talk one-on-one first.
Love it.
Don't like broadcast it.
Or
talk one-on-one.
Or leak emails to the press.
Well, we're all. I consider the social media that we're kind of swimming in.
Right.
It can be potentially drowning.
Well, Okay, I have so many questions for you, and you're doing a great job. Kathy is so kind enough to join us here, and we have a lot of people on the broadcast. We have Brent Walters from Raleigh, North Carolina, who said he's loving the interview, and he's watching it at the Pro Shop at the North Hills Club in Raleigh, North Carolina. Thank you, Brent. If you have a question for Kathy, please don't hesitate to ask. I have a number of questions coming in on the Instagram and on Twitter, which we will get to. Can any council, when, let's be honest, counselors at this level are professionals that have somehow found a portion of time in their lives to allocate to civic duty. You guys are not seasoned politicians that are, you know, on the Hill going through the battles decades and decades and decades. You guys are people like us. How can you guys be prepared for something like August 12th when you're just an average Joe like us? I mean, I just can't even imagine how difficult that time must have been for you.
It was horrible. That morning, I and my husband, we chose to go to the neighborhood south of the downtown mall.
Is that Belmont?
That was like the area with Friendship Court and
gotcha.
6th First Street
Gotcha.
Public Housing. And I wanted to talk to the residents of those communities, answer their questions. The whir of the helicopter was constant. People knew something was going to happen that day, and this was our low-wealth, predominantly African-American communities. I went there to listen and to try to explain that we've got resources, and mainly to listen. And when we were walking back, we crossed over East Market Street. I looked down this very street, and I saw smoke. I heard screams. I broke down in tears. I said, this is an invasion. It reminded me of like the riots I saw in the 60s. And then I went to East Jefferson Street, and I got caught. I saw coming out on the corner of 3rd and Jefferson next to the synagogue a platoon of neo-Nazis wearing Nazi helmets, flags with swastikas, saying they will not replace us. I was like, this is a nightmare. This is a horror movie. And then I went to turn the other way to go south, and a whole line of state police in riot gear, you know, marching down with riot gear. It was like, it was like, are these Roman legionaries? I mean, where am I? And then it was, again, I said, this is chaos. This is evil. And that was what shattered me to the core. The demonstration of sheer, brutal evil. Yeah. And that wasn't even the worst of that day. Right. Heather Hill would later be killed that day.
Heather Heyer, yeah.
Excuse me. Heather Heyer would be killed that day. Excuse me, not Heather.
Sure, yeah.
And then two state troopers. And so, and then, you know, I longed to hear that whir of the helicopter again. And it was gone. And so I think that itself personally, and I knew there were the people in the front line, the counter-protesters in the front line that got the brunt of it. And I have said in public, I thank them for being that front line that day. And then to realize how our police and our government systems just failed miserably that day. And I own that. And because I was on the dais. Now, we as counselors we do policy, we're legislators.
Right.
It's
You're
the
not
executive
day-to-day.
branch
Right.
are the ones that do the levers of government that make things happen.
Right.
So I can tell you after that day, I vowed never to let that happen again. Never to let that happen again to the city I love.
Judah, let's start with my question, and to that point, turn that into a highlight reel clip right there. That was a tremendous answer by Kathy. Do you think that, I have to ask this question, and I'm going to ask this in the right way. There's some folks that are online that are asking us, they're saying, this could have been avoided in retrospect. Perhaps that there was one counselor, and Councilor Bellamy, that may have been using this as an opportunity to further his political brand, political career. I'll throw it open-ended with you about that. What's your stance on that? I understand your stance on the statues, but what is your stance on how we got to A12 from the young lady in the press conference in, is it Market Street Park? To the first arrival of the KKK, to then the next arrival, and I was also there on A12. And I was going to be there. My wife hated that I was there, and she didn't talk to me for the rest of the day, but I knew it was going to be in the history books, and I knew it would be something that we would talk about, and I had to see it, and I've never seen evil like that. It took me aback, and I could see how people can have PTSD from seeing stuff like that. So I'll get back on track here. Your thoughts to the folks that say we got to that position because of perhaps some manipulation by Dr. Bellamy.
I consider that Dr. Bellamy is a man of conviction. I have worked with Wes very, very well. We have done many, many good things together. And we articulate our social justice motivations and our intentions differently. And I said this at the retreat. I said, I come from a Roman Catholic tradition deeply steeped in social justice teaching. How I express that is different than how Wes does it, or at that time, Kristen Zagos did it. I understand and can identify with conviction, but my MO, the way I've been taught, was that I look at all pieces of a puzzle, and I forever am always trying to find what we Catholics call the via media, the middle way, and that prudence is the virtue that must govern all the others, including justice, in order to find the way that's going to create the most common good. That's how I assessed that situation for myself personally in my first decisions on the statue, which was to absolutely add context, clarify them. It wasn't. It was my way of listening to the public, and that's what I was hearing. There was a difference of opinion, and I never at any time felt that Dr. Bellamy demonized me for having a difference of opinion with him. And I'm getting that out there very loud and clear.
Was it a genuine approach from the beginning for him? Was it motivated by anything else?
I do not judge people's motivations.
Understood. That's a fair response. I think that's certainly fair. How about your stance on what to do now with them?
As you well know, I'm in litigation right now. All 5 of us who were on dais at the time are being held accountable for significant danger. So yeah. I can talk only but so much.
Understood.
There is a public record, however, and I can speak to what I've already said publicly. Before August 12, 2017, I believed that those Confederate statues were horrible. They were examples of the lost cause narrative. I also felt with context we could create a positive learning experience and put them in their place. And it was in the past. After August 12, 2017, that vision of a white supremacist country is not the past for many people in this country. Those models of Confederate generals became iconic figures that rallied people that could exhibit extreme hatred and violence. And that is then led to our unified vote to get rid of not only one statue, but both of them.
It's so funny. And me personally, in the beginning, I was of the impression, let's leave the statues, because what does removing the statues do? You can't change history. Taking the statues out of the park does not rewrite our history textbooks. And then I started seeing the KKK come to Charlottesville, and I started seeing the Antifa come to Charlottesville. Then I was there on A12, and I saw the hate, and I was like, this is crazy. And then as I've become a father, and as I've become older, and as I realized that, we're at the point where it's time to if we're going to close the chapter on this, I think the only way for closure on this chapter is the removal of the statues and perhaps the preservation of them in a museum-type setting as opposed to a public park-type setting. And I know you can't talk a lot on this because you are on litigation, so I will go to other topics.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. And, I just want you to give some insight to the folks, and there's a lot of people on the stream, Kathy. What are you guys doing to get back on that same page and that trust? You guys had a fantastic meeting earlier this week. I'm sure it was difficult for you to even air out those grievances when the press was there. I mean, I can't think of a more awkward therapeutic session than that. That's not therapy at all. That's a press conference, essentially. But, I mean, put in perspective what you guys are doing.
It's that day doubled our resolve to become a just and beautiful city. And by that I mean a city that is equitable, that when we develop and redevelop, we make sure that we're not displacing people who've lived here a long time, who are of modest and low-income means, that we are doubling down our investments in affordable housing everywhere and anywhere throughout the city, so that we're going to, bit by bit, dismantle another legacy of Jim Crow, which is segregated neighborhoods by class and race.
Yeah.
And I think, and that's always been a conviction of mine, but I think now there's a fervor, there's a urgency to it. And
I really feel the same.
And it also coincides with the hardcore economic reality that cities are where people want to live today.
Yeah. Suburban life is a thing of the past.
And so what happens when there's high demand and there's not enough product? Prices go up. That's what's going on with the real estate market. We're not building fast enough.
Liza the dog saying hi.
Liza,
You're
the
obviously a dog
oxytocin
person.
and serotonin.
Okay.
Thank you.
She's a rescue dog. She's the I Love CVille mascot. Sometimes that
You are
terrifies people when she
beautiful.
comes on the set. You just handled that so well. You handled that so well. Oh, I'm sorry that Liza interrupted you there.
Oh, I'm not. And I like her sweater.
She's the I Love CVille.
She's dressed for the holidays.
She's the I Love CVille mascot. How you've talked about amending the city charter, and you've done it. And it's something that's being discussed again, I believe, and please correct me if I'm using the words correctly. There's an amendment to the city charter that's going to the Virginia Assembly about you guys potentially setting your own pay. Another amendment that I think may be being considered, actually I don't think it made it, about electing the mayor from a popular vote. Did that?
So that one, the direct election of a mayor did not make it.
But the city pay, setting your own pay.
Giving the city the autonomy and the authority to set its own salaries for its elected officials did make it into our legislative packet.
And we think, if you just, spitballing and speculating, we think it's going to get shut down. It's a very Republican stranglehold there. Where I'm going with this is, when you start amending the city charter, some folks say that terrifies them. Because when you start making changes once, it sets a precedent to start making amendments moving forward. We'll start open-ended with you on that. Amendments to city charters, people being terrified by that.
So the strategy in the back of my head is I want to break away from being under the stranglehold of the General Assembly in Richmond. We are a Dillon Rule state, which means that we can't do anything as a local government without getting the permission from the General Assembly in Richmond. These are folks that come from all different parts of Virginia. They don't know our local circumstances. They don't know our local population. And I find it ironic that the Republican conservative parties, and I say there's many factions, as plural, historically have always felt that the more local the government, the better the government. In Catholic teaching, it's called subsidiarity, an archaic word, but it's one that in many ways does make some sense, that the people who are close to the ground know what their people need the best. And so I'm I'm going at anything I can to chip away at that overbearing control at the state level on us as a city, especially at a time, as I said earlier, we've got to be the ones who are making sure we have the affordable housing we need. We are the ones that got to make sure that we are that walkable, bikeable community that has excellent public transit for anybody, regardless of income. We are the ones that have to get the job done now. So to have the state, the other thing that we try to put forward, and we did it last year, we're doing it again this year, to get us more local autonomy from Richmond, was to give us the authority to move our own Confederate statues. And that was always my thing. It's like, we got to get the legislation in Richmond to give us that authority, or get the courts to say yes. And every time, last year they said no, they'll probably say no again this time. But the more autonomy we have, the more we can better respond to the needs of our community.
I agree with that. The folks would counter that the Virginia Assembly is there to hold us accountable and to be like kind of a watchdog and to make sure things aren't being taken advantage of. But I agree with your take that the people that are at the ground level are the best suited to offer the perspective on where the city should go. A couple things I want to throw to you is the affordable housing piece has been so much in the news. Dave Matthews gives $5 million. Corin Capshaw and Riverbend Development are redeveloping Crescent Halls. Of course, that's right across from Corin's building over on by ACAC. Where I'm going with this is, how can a city that is so landlocked and so small and has nowhere really to go besides developing up, how do we solve an affordable housing problem, but do it in a way that does not impact economic growth? A lot of folks had this concern. Keith Woodard has a $50 to $80 million project on Water Street. The number changes whoever you talk to. He says he's got $1.2 million in infrastructure, skin in the game that he already put in. And he said he wanted to walk away because dealing with council was so cantankerous and arduous and so difficult. He said, to heck with my $1.2 million, I don't even want to go forward with this project. So here's the question. Folks are saying maybe City Council is so focused on affordable housing that they're missing the Keith Woodard projects, and they're losing the Willow Tree to Albemarle County.
Number one, I want to just make sure that the public understands that I supported the Woodard project. I believe that we need a robust economic system that generates the tax revenue we need to, quite frankly, be able to pay the debt service that's going to be generated by the bonds we need to float to build the affordable housing.
Right.
It's inextricably linked.
Right.
Okay. So I feel that I don't want to wonk out on you because I have got a background in urban planning, urban design, and architecture.
You're a perfect person to answer this question.
But I've been beating this drum for a long time. We've identified 12 areas in the city called small area plans. I teach a class at UVA every year that demonstrates they have the capacity in these areas. They're underutilized areas. They're either abandoned, obsolete industrial sites or old vacant parking lots, often with underutilized old auto repair places. They're just hanging by a thread. And we need to be building up, not out.
So obvious.
And so, but I do understand that, you know, there's a difference between a low-rise and a mid-rise and a high-rise building.
You're talking about price points.
And we're learning, and we've done studies, had an excellent economist come and give us great information in April. And it really struck me as an architect that, you know, there's a point when you go over 5 stories, you have to change your construction method so the building gets too expensive to put affordable housing on site.
Right. So that's why they're putting money into a fund.
Yeah. So we need to do at least 3 things. We need to get the private sector to do its part, and that means get the zoning right and get the incentives clear and easy to build the affordable units through their means. And then we also need to get them to also keep building, you know, the Class A office space, the more high-end apartment buildings that many of our empty nesters want, who are living in single-family homes today in our suburbs of the city and want to stay in the city but want to downsize but can't find any place. They downsize. They free up more housing stock for families who want to live in the city but now are living in places like, you know, Nelson County and
Fluvanna.
however.
Yeah,
so I think you got to get the rules of the game right. That's zoning. You got to get the form right. That's the character of the place, so that we're not destroying the goose that's laying the golden eggs.
Right.
This is a beautiful city. Don't kill it. And then you got to get proactive about the planning. You got to make sure you're getting the community engaged on what should we do with these sites. How can they be holistic communities that have the parks and the playgrounds and the affordable housing that we need? And that means you need a crackerjack, mission-driven, planning staff.
Why did the, can you give us some insights and behind the scenes here? Because I know you were in favor of the Woodard project on Water Street, the West 2nd project. I think that's what it was
West
called.
2nd,
Yeah, West 2nd. I mean, Kathy, I look at this as an entrepreneur. This creates jobs at so many different levels. It takes a demographic of people with disposable income and puts them downtown, and downtown needs disposable income. People are hurting downtown. The business owners are hurting. People could walk from Water Street and enjoy the downtown mall. People want to be downtown, and there's not enough supply for downtown. That's why Andrew Baldwin's development across from C&O, the core real estate development, $1 million, guys. That's why the brownstones in between Beer Run and City Walk and Water Street are selling for $1 million too, because there's not enough supply. Why did this die on council? A lot of folks that are watching here, John Pritzlaff, for instance, he's in commercial real estate here. A lot of folks are saying that the council's maybe more focused with the social justice piece and not projects like this. I know you voted in favor of it, but why did this die?
And I think that's an excellent question. I think all of us on council, myself included, need to do a better job connecting the dots. That to be a viable city, which is economically viable city, is not mutually exclusive to being an equitable city or a sustainable city. You got to do it all.
I totally agree with that.
And so
it's not just one thing.
And so what happens is that when it's just a statement to make that when you're in elected office, it's a cautionary tale for myself to be careful of being very narrow in your agenda. You got to keep broad, and you got to always learn. And when you stay in this kind of a job in public office, you begin to see how everything's so multifaceted and connected. So that West 2nd Street, and plus I've been the longest serving councilor.
Right.
I was there in the beginning. Satyendra Ahuja was the mayor.
Right.
This was his baby.
Right.
It was to serve and make a permanent home for the
city market.
Farmers City Market.
Yeah, our beloved city market.
And just 5 years ago, that was the cause celeb of Charlottesville. And that's also the hard, challenging thing to get across, is that projects transcend kind of political terms.
Yeah.
They don't go in 2-year cycles, 4-year cycles. They go 5, 6, 8 years.
Which is demoralizing if you're the entrepreneurial developer, that it takes that long to get your vision to come to reality. I mean, we're going to talk about this on this show. We're going to break some news in 2019 early about what's coming to Kim's Market. Really excited to talk about that turn of the calendar. But, I mean, the guys behind some of the projects I'm talking to say, Kathy, that they have 2 years of processes and bureaucracies and steps to go through. And some folks like Oliver Kutner are just saying, to hell with it, I'm going to Lynchburg, where I'm welcomed. And Oliver is a guy that's a visionary, and he has money and resources, and he has ego so much that he wants to leave a legacy in Charlottesville. And if that is used the right way, it could benefit the community.
Well,
he wants to build micro apartments, and
I
the micro
understand
apartments
that.
here would have been amazing.
And however, at the street level, also in that project, it was like 3 stories of blank wall covering up a parking garage, which destroys the walkable, active street life that you need to make a viable
That's
city.
fair, but there's got to be a balance.
So that's where the zoning, the rules have got to be clear. And I've been trying for 6 years to get them changed. I think we're going to do it. I think we're going to get there. We got to get this comp plan vision to work out in a better way.
That's one of the questions that has come in, and it's a great question. Kathy, what is your hope with the new comprehensive plan and what it will do to promote affordable housing in the city of Charlottesville? That's from Twitter.
So my hope with the new comprehensive plan is that it will the big overarching principle is that it will manage growth in a smart way that does translate into better equity, more sustainability, and keeps us viable and economically strong, okay? So that's the trifecta, right? To do that, we're going to have to look at the city holistically, understand that the most intense development really should happen on our corridors that have access to public transportation. Why? Because then when you beef up those areas in a very smart, walkable, desirable way,
You don't need a ton of cars there.
you don't need a ton of cars, and you're going to then get better headways
Quality of life,
of your buses. We wait 30 and 60 minutes. I get to ride my bike on West Main Street to get to UVA to go teach my classes. I get there faster than the bus. I know that. We got to do better. But you can't do better unless you have the ridership. I also, the urbanist, designer, architect I am, understand all too well that we got to have the right sidewalks, you got to have the street trees, you got to get the affordable units in place, you got to do it all. You can't just say one thing and not the other. And that just drives everybody crazy because everyone's thinking, oh, she's talking both sides of my mouth. No, I'm trying to create and build cities like they've always been built, as wonderful, diverse places. So that, I think we have to have a serious look at the pervasiveness of what they call single-family detached housing zones. So the Euclidean zoning that we have has been really exclusionary.
So 1990 or 1991, and I'm just learning about this now, and I want to credit Matthew Gillikin on Twitter. He's a friend that I've gotten to know, and he really understands the ins and outs of planning, and he's educating me on this. In 1990 or 1991, obviously about this, there was a massive rezoning. And a lot of the properties in the city are now zoned R1. In fact, I believe 55% of the land in the city of Charlottesville is zoned R1. And you can make a legitimate argument that the R1 zoning is in some ways racist itself because it's limiting the type of people that can go on this land. Because an R1 zoning is a single-family detached home. And having a single-family detached home for 55% of the land of the city is in some ways not inclusive, it's exclusive, because you're probably going to have to spend close to $500,000 to buy this piece of property.
And that's Rothstein's book, The Color of Law. It's a very important book that highlighted a lot of the underlying systems that created that, from banking to also federal government
Well,
policy.
it was done, and correct me if I'm wrong, you know a lot more about this. This was done in 1990 or 1991. It was a time when people were trying to stop white flight from cities, because they were going to suburbia for more land, bigger McMansions.
That was part of the reason why they gave school choice.
Right. School choice, to stop white flight.
That era.
Right. So where I'm going with this is, if 55% of the land in the city is zoned R1, seems to me that's the starting point.
So there's different ways, though, to both increase your affordable housing and also keep the physical character of your place. I don't know you or anybody else that doesn't want to be able to love their neighborhood.
Yeah.
And African American, white, low income, high income, there is a sense of place that is a strong pull, be it 10th and Page, be it Little High, be it Belmont, be it Fifield, be it anywhere, North Downtown. So what is it that those older neighborhoods do really well that made them diverse years ago?
North Downtown's not diverse.
Physically, it is.
You're talking about from a socioeconomic demographic?
I'm not. I'm talking about the physical form, and part of the reason why North Downtown is so expensive is because it's rare.
Well, it's proximity to the city, to
to
downtown
the core.
mall.
But when you look at what's going on in most of the park closest, the residential park closest to downtown, you've got single-family detached homes next to townhouses, next to small apartment buildings. Across the street, you've got an apartment building facing multiple different sizes of lots with different sizes of housing on it. So, and I take my students there every year, and I says, look, you could live here as a student, your mother could live here down the street, and your grandmother could live there up the street.
I think the average Joe in Charlottesville, playing devil's advocate with you for the sake of conversation, and thank you. The average Joe in Charlottesville sees North Downtown is very white and families that are doing 6 figures plus. And they're also saying...
I didn't pick North Downtown because of the socioeconomics.
Oh, I understand why you did.
But the physical form, if you can imagine, if that attitude about zoning was in Fry Spring, was in Greenberry, where people didn't mind or understand or see any problem with having townhouses across the street from them, guess what? You'd be putting more units everywhere.
Don't most people, and I'm not trying to assume here, does the average Joe not want a community where next door or the door after that or the door after that is folks that are potentially like-minded like him and her? I think it may be a difficult selling point to a lot of folks that's saying you're going to take their neighborhood and put potentially affordable housing tenants right in the middle. How do you combat that?
I think what I have learned from working very closely with many, many people in Charlottesville, many people who love their neighborhoods, what appalls them is when they do have their small-scale neighborhood. They have single-family detached houses, different size lots. Some of those have turned into businesses. And plunked down in the middle of it is a large footprint, 5-story building that blows the scale apart of the city.
You're talking oftentimes tied to UVA.
And it doesn't have to be. When you look at another neighborhood that has a strong urban design legacy of walkable block sizes with alleys and varieties of lot sizes, so small lots and big lots can be side by side, and then it's blown apart to make way for 4 or 5-story apartment buildings surrounding by asphalt parking lot, I understand where they're coming from. Look at the DNA of your neighborhood. Use that DNA to do the infill in a sensitive, creative way. And then put the height on the corridors where we need that extra level of density. But we can raise the number of units citywide and still protect the physical character of the neighborhoods by just simply mixing it up. It's called missing middle housing.
Right. One of the
But
neighborhoods...
Euclidean zoning has got to the point where, it has to be single-family detached, and they have minimum lot sizes. Get rid of that, because home ownership is something still people strive for across the board.
I mean, I still believe the first step to true wealth is home ownership.
And equity comes from that, and that's what's destroyed wealth creation in the African-American community that goes way back to the federal housing insurance.
Well, and I think one of the reasons we have such a racial divide in Charlottesville is because of this very topic with Vinegar Hill and what happened in our history, where we're taking away homes and businesses from a community of people, then creating a generational impact. We will talk about that shortly. Can we have a little more time here? You're killing it.
I love it. This is great.
You know, we have filled over an hour already. It felt like 10 minutes.
God.
I know. It feels like 10 minutes. You're doing such a great job. I, as someone who just really loves Charlottesville, I'm nervous about one neighborhood in Fifeville. So from the average Joe's perspective, I see the downtown mall migrating to Ix Art Park, and eventually we're going to have this beautiful pedestrian corridor from Court Square to the Ix Art Park. I see North Downtown is kind of like starting to stumble into Belmont. Now you're very hard-pressed to find a home in Belmont under $400,000. With Willow Tree coming to Woolland Mills, I think we all realize that Woolland Mills is about to become a zoo, and if you own property in Woolland Mills right now, you're sitting on a gold mine. Here's where I'm going with this. It seems to me, with Southside Charlottesville and the Wegmans, I personally live in Redfields, it seems to me that the Fifeville neighborhood is about to be swallowed from all sides by very white neighborhoods.
Well, right now, they're in the middle of doing their own small area plan.
This is the Fifeville Community Association?
This is the Fifeville Community Neighborhood Association.
Okay.
And I have been meeting with them and working with them to make sure that is the plan that they want, but it's also got to be tempered by realistic notions of, like, if you want a grocery store, you got to have these numbers of rooftops, okay? So you may not want, the word density, Americans are notorious for being somewhat schizophrenic in the sense that they hate two things: sprawl and density. Right. And there, you got to figure out what's your choice.
Right.
And so you got to do density by design. Okay, you got to do it right. And I think and we got to communicate what it gets you. We're not doing that. It gets you ridership for buses. It gets you rooftops for good businesses like grocery stores, and it gets you the units you need for diversity, which is the affordable housing piece. It has to be designed in a way that's sensitive to the fabric, the context.
Maintaining authenticity of the neighborhood and quality of life.
Exactly. And so the transitions matter, but the latest rendition of the overall comp plan I saw like ballooned out instead of looking at what is the real pieces that have the intense development. Because mind you, and we learned this from the flats, when that building flipped in 2016, it originally, before the land was improved, it was generating something like a couple $100,000 worth of tax revenue, and it was like even less than that. It sold for $2.5 million. It was developed, and then when they developed it and sold it again, it sold for $77 million. That kind of price inflation is what caused that big jump in assessments that we all felt in 2016 and 2017.
Yeah.
So it's not a panacea to say everything's got to be the Nathan Glazer model of build, baby, build as tall as you can get. You got to do it really strategically, because that's going to generate all the revenue you need to pay that debt service on those bonds that you got to float for the affordable housing. And then you got to make sure that you got the transition pieces in place that are respectful and celebrating in the adjacent neighborhoods. In West Main Street, it's flanked by African American neighborhoods, historic neighborhoods.
Yeah, Star Hill, Fifeville, 10th and Page.
10th and Page.
Yeah.
So
although if you go down 10th and Page now, Kathy, it's gentrifying. I mean, the colorful houses down 10th Street, where the old classic car spot used to be, it's now Peloton Station.
I know.
Shannon Worrell, yeah, you're a biker. Yeah, Shannon Worrell is redeveloping 10th Street with the 10th Street warehouses, and what she's doing with Mud House and Peloton Station. And if you go further down and up the hill, like you're going to Preston, and Preston Avenue is a story I want to talk about. Constant Wyatt wants you to ask about Dr. Bellamy's thoughts about renaming Preston Avenue. But where I'm going with this, 10th and Page, those colorful houses, it's white families there. You know what I'm talking about, those houses?
Yeah. Well, the
pink, the green ones?
Yeah,
and I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, there was some kind of tax incentive done to encourage folks to come and to move and buy these homes. And a lot of the folks that came and moved down here were Yankees that didn't necessarily realize what 10th and Page was about. Well,
the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Right.
So I think, and also be careful of what you pray for. I mean, there's endless numbers of old adages you can use. But so now, what we're getting more and more savvy is we're understanding, again, this desire for everyone to live in the city. Everyone wants to be here. It gets expensive as a result because we're not building the units, and we got to do it in a way that doesn't kill the goose that lays the golden egg, i.e. Charlottesville. Otherwise, other things will look like mercantile USA.
Yeah,
it'll look like everywhere.
It'll look like Northern Virginia. We don't want that.
We don't want that.
I don't want that.
So
I will move.
And I think we got a little taste of that with the flats and the standard. There's a little bit too much mercantile USA. So how do we get incremental again? And how do you get the energy of the private sector to come in? But think about small entrepreneurs, not the big guys from Atlanta that make this their national business.
Right.
So I think that's going to be
is that a knock on Dewberry?
I think no.
The emperor of empty lots?
Because that I'm calling adaptive reuse. The greenest building is one that's already built, and he's going to add to it. So I think what I'm talking more about is when you get kind of the corporate style building.
I understand what you mean.
That really
something
doesn't
that they're trying to do in every city to save money.
Yeah, and they've got a brand. You understand branding.
Yeah.
I get that too. But I think, so we're looking at, and I did put this in the legislative packet that didn't get much play because it was so much more interesting to the press and the public to talk about our salaries and whether we're going to have a directly elected mayor. But I did get in our packet what they call a tax circuit breaker. Hopefully the legislators in Richmond will let us do it. We'll do it because what it is to give a tax rebate to homeowners that pay a certain percentage of their income in real estate taxes. When it goes over a certain threshold, then that's a hardship on them. And so what we're finding in our historic African-American neighborhoods in particular, and I've met with several people about it, is that their incomes aren't rising fast enough to pay for the taxes on their assessments that are rising faster than their incomes.
Yeah, mine went up 17%.
So we gotta help them in a more aggressive way than we already are. And so this tax circuit breaker would give them at least a state tax refund. We're looking into more things like that. So I put that in there. Hopefully it'll pass. Every little bit helps, but we've got to now start thinking about how to assist homeowners who are of modest and low-income means so that they don't get pushed out of their homes. And then we got to keep building we have to build the structurally supported affordable housing. The market alone can't do it. It cannot do it, and it never was designed to do it.
Well, the affordable housing piece is the antithesis of how developers and entrepreneurs think. I mean, entrepreneurs and developers think capitalism and how can I, increase and stretch my margin as much as possible.
Sure.
And that's certainly not done through affordable housing. So I think that's one of the issues we have here. James Watson has a very good question. James Watson, I think, previously lived in Belmont, just recently moved to the county. He's a good supporter of the show. He says, Councilor Galvin, has the city looked into attracting new or major employers, Amazon Distribution Center, IKEA, or anything of this size? In a couple of years, there will be a need to reuse the Fashion Square site or perhaps other shopping centers. It's a good question.
And that is a regional question, and it's an excellent one. So number one, I want to stress that, again, given this, we're 10 square miles of the city, we're small footprint, we do have a lot of challenging topography and a lot of rivers. So it means that there's some areas that we really still can't build on, and that's why I'm a proponent of these small area plans, repurpose, rebuild. Still, the footprints are going to be small. When you talk about repurposing our shopping centers, I did succeed in pushing, and the council passed a small area plan for the Hillsdale hydraulic area, because that area that's going to need to change.
Totally.
And we've got now finally the plan. We got to change the zoning to allow a lot more different things happening there. Right now it's extremely restricted because it's just highway commercial. And then we change the zoning, and that starts getting people attracted and coming. They're doing the same thing in the county with regards to the Raya Road small area plan. Those are going to be important nodes along US 29. And I totally get it. We could have major engines of employment in these repurposed areas that are huge. The Fashion Square Mall is the same area as the entire downtown mall. That's 20 acres, right? And yet, you think about downtown mall, that's 20 blocks.
Fashion Square Mall's in Albemarle County. How are the city in Charlottesville, your city councilors, your contemporaries, yourself, and the Board of Supervisors working together to help potentially revitalize sites like Fashion Square? And where I'm going with this is Albemarle County Board of Supervisor Randolph recently was quoted in the newspaper as saying he has some distrust to city council. And that was in regards to keeping the courts downtown, and him saying that the city of Charlottesville has a long history of breaking promises for Albemarle County, and he was speaking specifically about parking. And how we were going to solve the short-term parking problem until the parking deck was built to service the courts. How do you characterize the relationship between the 5 city councilors and the Board of Supervisors today, and what can be done potentially to make it better?
I think it's constructive. And again, it's just all I can say is that it's good news doesn't make the news.
How important is it for the two groups to work together?
Oh, it's essential. So
it's
the courts,
right?
We did get the courts co-located, and the city is providing the structured parking, and the agreement is spelling it out. We did it. It took almost a decade,
right.
But we did it.
Yeah. And it was without question the right move.
Absolutely.
And folks that say they should have been in Albemarle County to revitalize, say, a Fashion Square or one of the other derelict shopping centers, I don't buy that. Court systems don't drive economies.
No, people go to work there and they leave.
They leave. They don't stay there and go get steak dinners and martinis.
And it was really going to hurt the clients that are served by the courts.
Right. And no one wanted it. The lawyers didn't want it. The judges didn't want it. The folks that rely on
legal
public
aid didn't want it.
transportation, no one wanted it. You guys made the right move right there. Put in perspective, I guess, the bigger macro question.
Okay, so what maybe people don't know we're doing, we did form this regional transit partnership. It's been meeting for a little over a year. Diantha McKeel is the chair. I'm the vice chair. Nakia Walker is on it, as well as Ann Malik. So we have been working closely to create the kind of land patterns that we need to sustain a robust regional transportation network. And it's also, we've created better tools to make the university transit, the Charlottesville Area Transit and Jaunt work more seamlessly. And that's thanks to the hard work of Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission. So I want to give a shout out to them, TJPDC. So that is the long, hard, slow work of good government. It's not flashy, it's not sexy, but it gets her done.
And it doesn't get reported, unfortunately.
And so we're working on that.
Yeah.
Related to that is the 2 small area plans I talked about. Diantha McKeel and I were both on the Hillsdale Hydraulic planning panel that worked with VDOT and worked with TJPDC and the stakeholders in the Seminole Trail Shopping Center. We got this plan done. We were like this. We made sure we gave connections and ties to Stonefield. It was the basis for what they call a smart scale application that will hopefully give us big dollars to finally fix the hydraulic interchange like we fixed the Rio interchange. And now the other big thing is the Charlottesville Albemarle Visitor and Tourist Bureau, CACVB.
That seems to be troublesome there. It doesn't seem like...
See, that was, again, I just actually questioned the press on how that was covered. We had an incredibly productive meeting yesterday. What was covered was the disputes, the disagreements. I made the amendment to the agreement, to the proposal put forth by Adam Healy that created the compromise that was needed to get everybody on board. We got her done. We are now moving forward to get a brand for the area so that we can have a robust tourist industry.
Andre Xavier from the tourism industry, he's one of the best in tourism in Charlottesville, is asking that question. Any word on the CVB? What is your thought on the proposed changes in marketing campaign that can help Charlottesville rebrand?
So what we did is that we are increasing the number of people on the governing board, but we're increasing the number of elected officials, which was kind of the bone of the contention, but that was because there was a strong desire to make sure that we were focusing on programming, not only marketing certain industries. And we're also going to get, but we are expanding the membership to include the Chamber of Commerce, to include the Monticello Foundation, and to also then include a member of the arts community and one more member that would represent one of the allied tourist-related industries, lodging, restaurant, whatever. So, voila, we've got the governing body that we all want, and then we had this group come in from Raleigh, North Carolina, that had been under contract with the previous director of the Bureau, and they've created a series of products that I think, they've been listening. We gave them more comment back. CVille is a brand. Just in and of itself. I love CVille. It works.
It's worked for me for 10 years.
I was just thinking recently, because we got to get Albemarle County in there, and I'm just going to throw this out. What do you think about, like, CVille AVA, Albemarle, Virginia? I mean, we got to get Albemarle in there.
Because they're hand in hand.
It's a hand in glove,
yeah.
Right?
I mean, I almost look at the city of Charlottesville as like the city of Charlottesville and Albemarle County. I mean, I think when one is doing well, the other one's doing well. When Charlottesville is strong, Albemarle County is strong. So we have to work together. You're on fire. We have over, guys, I count 22 questions here to ask to Kathy. I'm not going to be able to get to all 22. I apologize. I'm going to try to cherry pick some of the best. One of the good supporters of this program, Constance Wyatt, who lives up in Albemarle County, she asked of your thoughts on what Dr. Bellamy is trying to do with renaming Preston Avenue.
Again, we just learned of this, and I'm going to be listening. We had a Blue Ribbon Commission on race and public spaces that actually looked at the naming of a lot of our streets. I think we need to go back and look at the good work that they did, because I think they laid out a process that we could benefit from. And that's really all I can say right now.
Because if we rename Preston Avenue, then the next step is renaming the McIntyre School of Commerce.
Well,
the next step would be renaming what
Jefferson's
on. Thomas Jefferson owned slaves.
Yes, I know.
I mean, are we gonna eradicate Thomas Jefferson from Charlottesville?
I think what is in all. Whenever you have a dilemma, you've got to figure out what's the process that's going to help you discern the right path.
Right.
And this was just brought up. I respect Dr. Bellamy. I'm going to listen, but I'm also going to go back and look at what we've already done in this area, so that I don't like reinventing the wheel. If we've already covered some ground here, let's build on that foundation.
My fear is, for the sake of this program and conversation, my fear is the Pandora's box that will be open.
And
You're going to start renaming everything.
I respect that concern, and it's a very valid one. I do think that we have a lot on our plate. I'm just being honest.
You really do.
And
that's my next question is, you guys have, my next question from Twitter, you guys have enough to worry about. Why are we renaming streets?
And all I'm going to say
That's a
is
fair
that
question.
this was just an opening of the conversation.
Well, I really appreciate your transparency here. A lot more questions I want to get to. You're killing it here. This question, this is right up your alley. What are your thoughts of what's going to be in the next 5 years? It's hard for you to predict at the West 2nd site and the Landmark Hotel. Let's stick with the Landmark Hotel.
Okay.
Landmark Hotel is something that is on everyone's mind. Mike ran on a campaign to fix the Landmark Hotel.
Yeah.
That was a huge platform for Mike. I'm not trying to throw him under the bus, but that was his platform.
Well, and I want to give some kudos to Mr. Signer, because he did. He got it. He had the votes. He got it to the finish line. We were doing the meetings with Mr. Dewberry, and at the last minute there was a change of vote.
What happened?
I don't know. There was, we had been moving along. We had actually gotten a parking agreement signed. We had gotten an understanding of what was needed to actually make his project pencil out. And we did give assistance, but in the long run, we were making far more money than we were giving him to kind of give him the boost he needed.
And on top of that, you're taking an eyesore from our crown jewel, most importantly.
And it really was there. I'll never forget it, because we had a very strong microburst, and literally one of the beams of the building came crashing down into the CVS building. So it is. I'm still committed to that project. I don't think it's dead. I think it's dormant.
Why did the vote change at the last minute?
I think I believe it was a question of. At that time, it was still Councilor Zakis, and she was always against the project because she just didn't like the idea of giving any breaks to private entities, and that's a valid opinion. But at the time, Mr. Fenwick and Mr. Bellamy were on the council as well. Both of them had been supportive of it, and both of them changed their minds. I think the only thing you could do is ask them. As they say, I don't pretend to know anybody's motivations.
Right, we will. We certainly will ask them. I mean, as someone who's an architect and loves buildings and loves cities and loves Charlottesville, when you walk downtown and see it.
Oh, absolutely. It's
everything against you, what you stand for.
And I liken it to the stake in the heart of the city. It really needs to be fixed.
A lot of questions here. The next question I have for you is your thoughts on, this is from Twitter, the Guadalajara lot that is now owned by the city. At one time, and I'm going to paraphrase the question here from the viewer, during the Charlottesville parking wars, when Charlottesville City was going toe-to-toe with Mark Brown, you guys purchased the Guadalajara and Lucky 7 lot as a potential leverage point to say, hey, we'll just build a parking lot here. We don't need you, Mark Brown, and the Water Street parking garage. Where I'm going with this is, now that we have no more wars and we're getting along and everyone's cool, what's the plan for
Guadalajara
and Lucky 7?
I can't talk about this motivation. That was not the motivation for our buying that lot.
Okay.
Our motivation was to provide the parking that was needed to get the court's decision complete.
Okay.
That's directly related to having...
Even though it came in during the brutal negotiations.
That was one of those terrible coincidences.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
And
the average Joe sees them linked.
I know that.
Yeah.
But especially when you're in negotiations of buying land or dealing with contracts, as in those both cases with Water Street as well as the Guadalajara site, as well as the negotiations with the courts, which is also land and contracts and agreements, all that was behind closed doors, and I get it. But this is now, we can say this publicly, because the court's decision has been made. We are co-located, and that parking garage that's going to be on the corner of Avon and East Market is essential to that deal. And it will also help us tremendously, because we're losing all the parking underneath the Belmont Bridge, because we are finally, remember when that was the big cause celeb?
I do remember that.
It's finally going to get rebuilt. But that's going to take the parking underneath it away. we want to still grow more people to live and work on the mall, so we're going to need more parking spaces. People have got to get used to the fact that they can't park on the street and they can't park in surface lots. We're going to have a beautiful building coming on Avon Street, the old Tarleton Oaks site. It's going to be a beautiful building.
A couple more questions. You're killing it here. Your thoughts on, this is from Twitter, and the viewer is asking, misspelling words here. The viewer is essentially asking, tax assessments for the Ix Art Park and Mr. Kootner and Kajean's property went really high. Are we not encouraging them to take away the Ix Art Park and build condos or apartments as a result?
Oh, wow. And I want to just say Ludwig Kuntner has been an excellent citizen involved at all levels with community planning and discussions.
It's not just about a dollar for him,
it's
like
not.
a lot of others.
It's not.
Yeah.
And that is also another small area plan. Wonkiness again, I'm sorry, but small area plans are the one thing that focus us to draw our resources and make sure that we're going to do that equitable, sustainable, beautiful development. So that area is also the area that has our highest numbers of units of affordable and assisted housing from Public and Friendship Court. We want to keep those units safe and secure, and that is the stabilizing effect to keep us diverse, okay? And there's going to be more affordable housing built on their sites.
Piedmont Housing Alliance.
Piedmont Housing Alliance.
Yeah.
And that is a very good thing because we're building in tiers of affordability, so people aren't going to always stay really, really poor all the time, and they're not going to have to be, when they make more money, they don't have to move to Waynesboro. We want everybody to stay and become, upwardly mobile as much as they want. They don't have to, but if they want to, they need to be able to find places that they can move to that they can still afford that won't hurt them. And plus, we're preserving. We are 100% one-for-one replacement for all the very low-income housing in that area. We created this vision plan called the Strategic Investment Area Plan. It's won awards. It taught us that we needed to reintroduce more streets and blocks and walkability, more public parks. And it told us how much we needed by way of rooftops to kind of have the grocery stores and the stuff that we need to sustain life in a viable neighborhood. And it taught us how to change the form so that we get more out of it without having to always go mid-rise to high-rise buildings. So you tighten up on your setbacks, you use more of the lot. You create buildings that are actually still can be cooled by street trees, and they have shared party walls so that you don't have such high heating bills, that kind of stuff. So it's sustainable development. And we're having these conversations and discussions of what they call a form-based code, so that we make it an incentive so that you want building height. You can only get building height when you build affordable units on site. But we've done it in a way, we're talking about it in a way that we know still works with the private development.
Great answer right there.
So, but we're supporting the Housing Authority, we're supporting Friendship Court, we have to support Habitat, we have to support any other nonprofit housing development company to build affordable housing everywhere and anywhere. Hopefully we're going to see on our desk, on our dais, land bank, so that we can start saving land and flipping it to nonprofits who will build en masse more affordable housing. So it can't just be the private sector alone.
Right.
They got to do their part. The nonprofit sector has got to do their part. Government is the glue that pulls it all together.
He has just informed me that we have over 40 questions for you now. So I know you have to go. So we will wind down. I'm going to ask you two more. And then hopefully I can get Councilor Galvin to give us an Irish rendition of one of the songs. She was in a band, so maybe we close that there. Two questions left here, and thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you.
This is from Twitter. Councilor Galvin, please explain why the West Main streetscape is worth all the money we are putting into it.
Okay, so right now, we're putting in about $4 million, and it's being matched by the state. We put in an application to get more matching money by the state. It is a major corridor that ties together the downtown mall to the university and the Amtrak station. Trains are hugely important to the state of Virginia. So in my mind, that's a smart investment when you know you're going to get matching money for everything you do by the state of Virginia. You're leveraging your local dollars to do greater things. So if anybody's ever walked on that street, you'll know that it's not ADA accessible. Americans with Disability Act, given that President Bush passed away just recently, salute to him for passing that law. It is not passable for anybody with a disability. The trees, the old Zolkova trees, didn't have enough soil capacity built in. They're burgeoning up and breaking the sidewalks.
Big time.
They're diving into foundations. They're dying. So we needed to create, and then we've got, our sidewalks are so cluttered with telephone poles and
lime scooters.
And lime scooters now, but the clutter with all the utilities is made it so that this very constrained right-of-way doesn't have enough space for even 2 people to walk side by side. A baby stroller with 2 babies' seats in it. A person in a wheelchair can't do it. So to be an equitable place, you got to make sure that you've got walkable surfaces and safe, comfortable places that, guess what, will also support the businesses on that street.
Yeah.
So it is both an investment in the viability of the city, but also in the sustainability of the city, because the trees are going to be done in a much better sustainable way that then cool the air and clean the CO2, the greenhouse gas emissions, out of the air. And it's equitable because we're going to have more safe, sheltered bus stations. Walking and biking and taking the bus are the most affordable means of transportation. So again, it does it all. Sustainability, equity, beauty, viability. That's when you get that kind of bingo plus state money that's paying for half the bill, I don't see that as being good money thrown away.
Yeah, well said. Second to last question.
Okay.
This one's from Instagram. The viewer would like to know why you supported the $500,000 allocation to the New Hill Development Corporation. And the viewer says the $500,000 used in the Star Hill neighborhood, where's it going to go? It seems like the Star Hill neighborhood is so tight already that there's not really a lot we can do with it.
Okay.
So it's kind of a two-part question.
What is it? There's something in Proverbs that, or some prophet said that when the people lack vision, they perish. Okay?
Because there's no plan in place as of yet from New Hill.
All we did was basically give seed money to a startup.
Okay.
And that startup is African American owned development company.
Okay.
And, just for the viewing public, we give tax breaks, a couple $100,000 in tax breaks every year to start-up tech industries. Those are predominantly white, predominantly male. This was a situation where a proposal was brought to us by an African-American led company, and it was a vision to provide opportunities for home ownership and entrepreneurship targeting the African American community. Certainly would not be as segregated neighborhood, but to have that kind of vision and drive was just compelling. And when you look at, so the area that they're working in is this 48 acres. It does include what used to be Vinegar Hill. It doesn't exist anymore, but Star Hill is now what it's called. And that, too, is an area that feels the pressure for development.
Totally.
And if that's going to be still
its
part of retain the legacy of the excellence of the African American community from before urban renewal, which they had fantastic businesses, very diverse, very walkable. That area went from 9 blocks to 2, from walkable streets to mega streets for cars to bring that white flight back in town. But then what did we get? We got fast food. We got, Shabeens is excellent.
Shabeens great.
And then, of course, you got the great chocolate place. So all those businesses are fantastic. It's not, but I'm just saying that it went from something that was rich and diverse and to something that was car-centric. So that's why I support that.
But the interesting thing is, guys, they didn't give them the $500,000. If the plan does not come to fruition,
absolutely,
the money comes back.
And
that's something that's lost.
So about 2/3 of it was for that small area plan, which is all about community engagement.
Right.
And then the other third of it is going to go to support financial learning and home ownership for their mission, and they're doing it in partnership with all the other nonprofits in the community. The networking is happening.
I think the most intriguing aspect of that story was the fact that Mayor Walker voted against it, and it surprised me because she voted against something that is supportive of a lot of the constituents that put her in office. That's a topic for another time. I know you got to go here. Last question here. This is a good question, and I think a fair question. Councilor Galvin from Instagram. It seems like Corin's development company is the only one doing projects in Charlottesville. I know he's doing a lot of good with creating affordable housing. Why is Corin the only developer doing things in Charlottesville, and is he using the affordable housing piece to build goodwill with you guys for other projects?
Well, I'm going to just push back on that one because you got Stony Point doing the dairy building, which is a
PBM, Paul Manning's project.
Beautiful project. Yeah. You've got people like Richard Price, architect, small developer, doing beautiful infill on East Market Street. I think Corin certainly has the big name, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
and the
Dave
deep
Matthews
pockets.
and the deep pockets.
Yeah.
So I am all of the mind that we need to diversify is best, including the development community, so that we get a variety of look and feel, and that's what makes us look authentic, instead of, one thing for all occasions. And so I think we've got a situation with the Friendship Court, where there's a fantastic team. Grimm and Parker is the architectural team. Harkins from Maryland is the contractor. You're going to get variety of look and feel, which is what cities are all about. They're supposed to be diverse in physical form as well as human form. So I think, Corin's doing his civic duty. God bless him, thank him. But there's a lot of other good people out there trying to do their best work too. And we got to get the rules right so that we can get them to do their best work.
I spent 90 minutes and change with you.
Wow.
It's been
It's
absolutely
been
my pleasure.
wonderful.
I've had a chance to get to know you. I can honestly say that I feel Charlottesville's lucky to have you serving on City Council. You going to run again?
That remains to be seen.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go there yet.
Yeah?
I'm going to enjoy the holidays.
Because it's right around the corner.
Oh, yeah, I know that.
It's November.
Yeah.
Well, according to the city charter.
Well, that's been changed.
I know. Right.
Yeah.
You know what? If you do run again, I think, and I will say this, I think Charlottesville would be fortunate to have you serve another term. And I think you probably have a lot of projects, knowing you, and I feel like we have a lot of similarities. You probably have a lot of projects that you probably want to see through, and you are an overachiever that I feel like likes to dot the I's and cross the T's and not leave anything to chance where you're not in control. So if I was a betting man, my hunch says you run again.
Well, I appreciate your confidence in me. I also know that like any human being, I've made serious mistakes, and one of the biggest mistakes is to think that you're indispensable. And I pray to God that I have the humility to understand that, and that part of what we all must do in our lives is know when to also pass the baton. I'm not saying anything, but I appreciate your confidence in me.
I don't think the time is now. I know you got to go. I don't think there's too much on the table to accomplish for us to lose someone of your vision and experience. And my trepidation is that council will become almost in some ways a popularity contest. The person who's the loudest and the most vocal is going to win, and perhaps that's not necessarily the right candidate to leave Charlottesville in a post-812 environment where it is tough out there.
Well,
the popular person's not the right person all the time.
Well,
most of the time.
You know, there are show horses and there are work horses, and
You're a workhorse.
And so. You know, I don't know when that's ever going to change, though.
It will never change.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine? What are you going to do when you retire? You're going to be so bored. You're going to be so bored. All right, let's close this way. Will you sing for us?
All right. Let me.
Because I'm going to turn this into a highlight reel.
Let me see if I can think of something. I might get the wrong key because I don't have anything to pitch me.
Okay.
I have seen the lark flying high at morn, heard his song up in the blue. I have heard the blackbird pipe its note, the thrush and the linnet too. But there's none of them can sing so sweet, my singing bird, as you. Na 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 na, my singing bird, as you.
That was amazing. I'm close to tears right now.
Oh, that's what I sang to my babies.
I have goosebumps
when they were little.
I'm serious.
Well,
Judah, that was not all. Was that awesome? Highlight
well,
reel.
thank you for letting me do it.
You crushed it. Look at me. I mean, guys, she made us look better today. Kathy
wow.
Galvin, thank you.
I don't
for
ever
joining
get
us.
a chance to sing on the dais, so that was cool.
She put in perspective something about her character. I asked her for 60 minutes here. We're now 45 minutes over, and she's been just absolutely pleasant. I want to wish everybody a happy holidays and a Merry Christmas. I want to thank her. This interview is going to be archived on ilovecville.com. I would encourage you to tell your friends and family and all of us in CVille to take a look at Cathy Galvin, the counselor. We're going to take next week off to be with our families. We're going to come back the week after the 1st.
Amen.
With Heather Hill's going to join us.
Oh, good.
Mayor Walker's going to join us. Some entrepreneur, Ferdinando, that's going to open up a barbershop on the UVA corner is going to join us. Guys, I Love CVille is all about the best of Charlottesville. And I think what you see here is we can have a friendly conversation. We can disagree, we can agree, but we can do it in a respectful fashion. And I close like I always do. Charlottesville, please be good to each other, okay? Enjoy your weekend.
Wow. Well, I mean, I overdid it, though. I went way too long.
It was so easy. I looked at the clock, and when I looked at the clock, we were at 62 minutes. And that was the first time I looked at it. And I'm telling you, that never happens that way. So I'm truly grateful.
I am grateful to you.
Yeah, you killed it. I think you're going to get incredible feedback. We'll give you some background on what's going to happen here.